Everybody, welcome back. It's Capitalism, the remix. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Evan Lutz, the founder and CEO of Hungry Harvest. He is, without doubt, one of the most authentic, talented, and persistent entrepreneurs that I've ever met, and hopefully you've ever met too. We had a great conversation about the history of Hungry Harvest, the pivots, the trials and tribulations. So I think this is going to be a really impactful podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome back to Capitalism, the remix. All right, here we are back again. Evan Lutz, how you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
well, I'm. Thanks for coming. I know you got a lot on your plate. A new baby, practically a new business.
Oh, it's all good.
So
Always worth talking to you, Jeff.
thanks, man. A lot going on. Now, normally I have people introduce themselves here on Capitalism Remix, but you are, as always, were on top of things and you filled out the pre-show notes, and I was reading it, so I'm like, I have to read this again. So I'm gonna do a little introduction of you.
Sure.
Evan Lutz is the founder and CEO of Hungry Harvest. Hungry Harvest was one of the first companies to come through the Conscious Venture Lab. Now it says here, Evan Lutz is a 31-year. You're only 31 years old, dude.
Yeah.
Jesus
Well,
Christ!
it's
I feel like I've known you for 30 years.
I know. It's pretty wild. Jeff, you've known me for a third of my life. Pretty crazy.
That is insane.
Right?
31-year-old social entrepreneur from Baltimore, Maryland, who's passionate about food justice, entrepreneurship, and the Baltimore Ravens. I'm a newly passionate Baltimore Ravens fan. I'm really a Giants fan, but
It's okay.
with Mr. Bisciotti as a supporter, I've turned into a Ravens fan,
We
like Evan.
we will welcome you with open arms, Jeff.
Thanks. It says here he's a frequent guest on NPR, the Washington Post, and Baltimore news stations. He's been recognized in Forbes 30 under 30 in the social entrepreneurship categories, Baltimore's 40 under 40, and Montgomery County Emerging Business of the Year award, which was previously won by Honest Tea, Sweet Green, and Comcast. He was also featured, as many of you know, on ABC's Shark Tank, where he made a deal with Robert Herjavec. Evan, welcome to Capitalism Remix.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Uh,
Really appreciate
yeah, man,
it.
we're excited. We're excited about this. And I was, as I was reading through your bio last night, I wanted to make sure. And not only is all of that true, an amazing entrepreneur, business partner, but also a really good friend. So I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Um, so first things first. Let's talk about the three steps from yesterday.
Mm, three
Your
step.
daughter taking three steps.
Yeah. Well, I thought you were first referring to like the three steps I needed to take from yesterday's meeting strategy session. I was like, oh God, you've
No,
really put me on the spot here. Um,
no, 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 no,
my
no.
my daughter proceeded to take three steps yesterday. Her first steps, I was not a witness. I was unfortunately or fortunately in a meeting with Jeff and some other investors. Which is quite all right. We had a great time. Um, and then last night she proceeded to act like a one month old and not sleep from about 12:30 a.m. until 6:30 this morning. So here we are with some late afternoon caffeine, you know.
Yeah. All right. Some hot tea late afternoon.
Yeah,
Well, first of all, it's appropriate for one, congratulations, but two, this podcast is about a bunch of things. Capitalism remix about rethinking or helping people rethink the way that we experience, practice, and think about capitalism, but also advice to entrepreneurs from other entrepreneurs. So not that we would ever wish anyone to miss the daughter's first three steps, but it seems to be part of the business, I guess, huh?
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it would be pretty impossible to run a business and watch your baby 24/7. So they're for most things, not there for other things. It's really about being in the moment, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And your wife is the best. She's the greatest. So I'm
yeah,
sure that you probably got an earful, but it'll be all be all right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
Um,
quite all right. But go ahead.
yeah. So let's, I wanted to start off by talking. I really would just love to have you sort of run through this sort of journey that's been Hungry Harvest. I've been there for a lot of it, but from startup though to Shark Tank, to growing the business to Series A to struggles to pivot to today. I mean, founders can learn so much from what you've been through. Um, so I would just love to have you sort of talk about that in general, and then sort of how you've sort of made it through. We talked yesterday a lot in the meeting about resilience, right? And sort of that ability to keep going. So would love to just sort of have you walk us through that, everything that you've gone through up to today, and however you want to put couch that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it makes sense to start where my motivations were for starting a business, a social enterprise in particular. And it was around when I was, I don't know, 14 or 15 years old. I always sort of fantasized about starting a business that did some kind of impact on climate change, on the food system, and made a positive impact on folks' lives. I never thought I would actually do it, right? So I'm sort of pinching myself every day. And a similar analogy I can draw today as how I felt 14, 15 was I've always wanted to do a couple physical endurance feats. One, hike the Appalachian Trail front to back, and second, climb Mount Everest. Now, one day I might be on the top of Mount Everest and pinching myself because I can't believe I'm actually there, right? But here, I'm sitting here, talking to you, uh, and it seems very much a very far away reality. And that's sort of how I felt about starting a business and actually making it my career when I was 14 or 15 years old. I thought it was something that I would never be able to actually do, but just sort of a fantasy that I believed in. Uh, I went to the University of Maryland and studied business there, had some fantastic professors that really taught me not just the skills of business and sort of the skills you need to actually run and operate a business, but also how to really bring the intangibles into business, the people management, the people skills, and the social impact that you can bring to a business if you properly engineer. And so the idea pretty much started for Melissa Carrier's Social Innovation Fellows class, which Jeff, you spoke to in February of 2014. We actually had to start a real business. Uh, I had talked to a local farmer who was coming to a farmer's market who had surplus produce on his farm. I had no idea what that was. I went out to his farm, saw these peppers that were half green and half red, saw these apples that were funky shapes. Um, and then I made a deal with him to try and sell that produce to college students because as a business major, I knew that he could sell it to me for pennies on the dollar. I could sell it for less than retail and make a little bit of a margin on it, right? And I told you about this, Jeff, in February of 2014, uh, and then continued to pester you for the next 6 months until I finally walked into the office one day and got your attention. Um, in May 2014, after we had a few months of sort of the trials of selling this ugly fruit in front of our student union, turned it into a real life social enterprise, an LLC, and started delivering produce to folk stores in Tacoma Park. Again, this was about 10 years ago, and without going any further, I think it's one of my first, I think probably our first milestone as a business, besides actually signing the papers for an LLC, was meeting you, and you're as much of a part of this journey as anything or anybody we've met. So I just want to acknowledge that as well as we're talking.
Well, no, I appreciate that, Evan. There's a lot more to talk about, but I think that um, there's a lot of people who have sort of leaned in to support you, and I think a lot of it has to do with your your personality, your temperament as well. So we're obviously thrilled to be on this ride. I want to keep going down that path, but before we do that, what was the issue with food waste? How did you come to that as an idea? Because it's something that you, as you said, you've been thinking about this for a long time. How did you come to that as being the thing that you wanted to attack?
I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household where we were food secure, where we had a very healthy diet. We had a green vegetable with every meal. And I did a lot of volunteering growing up at a few charities that are in downtown Baltimore, Our Daily Bread, to Maryland Food Bank. And I just remember looking at the quality of food that we were serving very vulnerable people, and just thinking there's something wrong with that. I was at the time I was in early teenage years, so I couldn't really imagine how to fix that. I just remember this sense of this doesn't make a lot of sense, and so I really tried to. I've always been interested in the food scene. I've always been interested in climate change. I believe it's the greatest threat to humanity that our generation has ever, or humanity's ever faced. And our generation, I'm not just speaking about people my age, but everybody who's alive today, when I'm talking about that, our generation, has an opportunity to fix it, right? There's more technology, more ideas out there that can fix it than ever before in human history. And so I learned about food waste from this farmer who basically brought me to his farm and told me about 40% of his crop every single year, every harvest would go to waste. And did some more research and realized that 40% of everything that's grown in the United States goes to waste. And this is a very recent phenomenon, Jeff. I mean, human beings have been, there's civilization in the United States for 10,000 years. The past 50 years have been filled with food waste. So I figured, business is one of the best tools we can use to help solve this problem.
Wow, that's and so I remember when we first talked about this, and you told me, I think it was, you were telling me about the order of magnitude, and you said think about Raven Stadium being filled from the field to the rafters with broccoli 4 times. That's how much food we're wasting, which is a pretty impactful image that to put in someone's mind. But I didn't know that it was just such a more recent phenomenon. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's really the globalization of the food system, the centralization of the food system. 100 years ago, people in Baltimore didn't really have access to oranges or mangoes or avocados, and you can make an argument that, well, it's great now that we have avocados and strawberries year round, right? And you can get to try all these different foods. Um, but the reason that has come to be is because of sort of this mass adoption of refrigerated trucking, refrigerated shipping that's happened all over the world. Again, there's definitely certainly pros of what that has done to the food system, of how that has aided communities, aided farmers. One of the cons, though, is that it's forced sort of corporations. The corporations have basically owns the food system. There's like 10 large corporations that own about 90% of the food that we eat. And a lot of those have sort of invested in these large department-like grocery stores where you need a certain amount of foot traffic to justify this giant grocery store going into a neighborhood, and they don't grow into neighborhood if they don't have that foot traffic. So that leads to kind of food deserts, areas of high food insecurity. It also leads to a ton of waste. I mean, it makes more sense economically for a trucker or for a farmer to truck their strawberries from California over to the East Coast, because that's what will sell given the time of year. That also leads to a lot more waste. And so again, the centralization and globalization of our food system has done a lot for humanity, I would say. In the process, it has caused a massive amount of waste, so much so that we don't really know what to do with.
So it's that like that unintended consequence, right, of the
Yeah.
benefit. And I remember when you first came to the Conscious Venture Lab and you were talking to, or I don't know if you talked to Rick Frazier, my old partner in the hedge fund,
Hmm.
but one of his first thing was, this can be a great business because there's always money to be made in waste,
That's right.
right? There's always money to be made in figuring out ways to sort of ameliorate waste. So you
Yeah.
figured something out there, which is really interesting, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, that's something I didn't know or hadn't thought about, right? Is the downside of the benefit of trucking and refrigeration and getting different foods in different places.
Hmm.
So let's talk about and first one thing, shout out to Melissa Carrier. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about her name in a long time, but she was a really she was really impactful for me and ran a great program at the University of Maryland. I think is she at North Carolina or Duke
She,
now or something like that.
I believe she's at NC State. No, I'm sorry, she's at
Oh,
North Carolina, UNC.
yeah,
But I,
yeah,
I,
UNC.
I talk to her from time to time, and she's doing great. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll have to reach out to her, maybe try to get her on the podcast too.
yeah,
That would be cool to hear her perspective on some of this. But so all right, so we got through the startup, the farmer, why you were there. Let's talk about sort of the next phases of Hungry Harvest, where you went from there. So I remember, you came through the Conscious Venture Lab, and then all of a sudden you got noticed or an invitation to Shark Tank. How did that all come about?
yeah. I think it was a family friend of one of our employees at the time had been on the show and told the producers about us, and they sent us a note encouraging us to apply. We had a call with them, and this was I don't know 8 months into the business, and um, we did not have our business model up to speed yet. We were still really figuring things out. I was 21 years old at the time, and I willingly admit this that I had no idea what I was doing. Right, I was really just trying to learn and figure things out and get boots on the ground. And so they told us about this process, about how I don't know, 40,000 companies apply every year. They only select 150 to actually come out to California and film. Even if you do film, there's not a guarantee that you will air. You have to handwrite in this whole application. You have to make a 5 to 10 minute video and submit it. And this was a pretty big time suck for a team of, I don't know, 3 or 4 folks who were just basically going around door to door to try and beg people to sign up for a free trial for a produce delivery service, right? So at first we declined politely, um, because of the long shot of us actually getting on the show. They reached out to us again a couple months later, and we thought we might have a better shot, better track, um, than some of the other companies that are randomly applying. So I think we took a weekend, sat down, and just did the application, made the video,
Yep.
submitted it all. We kept on getting onto more rounds and more rounds. Finally, I think it was in June 2015, they called me up and told me that they're going to invite us out to California to go film. Um, I watched every single episode of Shark Tank before that, wrote down every question that's ever been asked on the show, write down a very practiced answer. I remember we did a practice Shark Tank session. I think it was at the Motley Fool,
Yep. Motley
back.
Fool with Tom Gardner.
That's
Yep.
right. Um, and then went on the show. I was incredibly nervous. I still remember exactly how I felt. I um, I knew that the point of the show was basically to make sure you don't look like an idiot, right? And really present yourself well. Didn't really matter if you made a deal or not. It was about how you present yourself to the 8 million people or so that are watching. And so if I got through my short 90-second um, initial sort of pitch and started off with a question and answer, I thought I was going to have a good show, and I didn't stutter at all, and they made a good edit. I was up there for maybe about 30 minutes, and ultimately made a deal with Robert Herjavec, and it aired about 6 months later. We had a little watch party in the Howard County. Um, I guess it was called the MC. I forgot what it counted. And it was
Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship.
thank you. It was at the Conscious Venture Lab offices.
Yep.
We had the Lieutenant Governor come out, the Howard County executive, a lot of business leaders and friends. We had WBAL, Jamie Oliver, or I'm sorry, Jamie Costello was
Yeah.
recording live from the studio. It was a really neat time. And that was in January 2016. And we did so much work to get on the show, to practice and rehearse, to get the company ready for the show. And then the real work began, right
Yep.
after we aired. Then we needed to hire a team. Then we needed to raise money. Then we needed to expand cities. So it really was an eye-opening experience for me. I've always just to wrap up Shark Tank with this one comment. I've always been a pretty hard worker and prided myself on working hard. I think it's funny how your perspective on hard work changes as sort of you age and you go through your career. I thought those 2 weeks leading up to Shark Tank were the hardest I was ever going to work, and it was going to go downhill. And maybe I'm looking back on that and say, "Damn, those are the easy days." Uh, that
Those
was
were the good old
that
days,
was really
right?
nice. Yeah, and that it hasn't. It's only picked up speed since then. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey though, in all seriousness, since Shark Tank, and it definitely helped project us to where we are today.
So all the entrepreneurs out there that listen to the show, listen to the podcast, remember that it's not going to get any easier. Not for some quite some time anyway, right?
Yeah, I would also say, I mean, I think about this a lot. I do a little bit of running and run some races, and there's always this voice in my head when I'm running a half marathon in mile 8, and I'm super tired at mile 8. I'm like, how am I going to go 5 more miles? Well, the fact is, you're not actually going to be that much more tired at mile 13 than you are at mile 8, right? You're still going to be working just as hard. And so
Yep.
apply the same principle to entrepreneurship. So even though you have more mountains to climb, there might be no end goal in sight. You're actually going to be pressing just as hard in a few years or a few months as you are today, as long as you can keep a steady sort of perspective about everything. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't, I tell this to entrepreneurs all the time that our students or aspiring entrepreneurs, don't worry about how hard you're going to work. Don't get nervous about it. You got to just kind of keep your foot on the gas, right? And that's
Yep.
what's most important. Stay in the moment.
Yeah, you've done a great job of that. Before we leave the Shark Tank, though, I want to talk about. I was thinking about the show, and remember, Barbara Corcoran said, "You didn't have what it takes
Mm.
to be a great CEO." She said you were too nice. She liked you, but you were too nice. How did that make you? How did that feel?
Yeah, hey, Barbara Fair, if she's listening to the show, I don't think she is, but that is completely
She
fair.
might. You never know.
You never know. That's right. Um, that is completely fair assessment for me. It is absolutely a key characteristic of a lot of entrepreneurs I know to be very nice. And nice is not a negative, it is absolutely positive. And nice, it means really being empathetic, right, to your customers or your employees or your partners. And there's a way of running business that inspires people rather than instills fear in folks, right? And I think
Yep.
most some of the sharks, maybe Barbara, is used to running her empire and her business by, if you don't do this, you'll lose your job. Well, that's not really the way I roll. We've been able to keep people for a very long time and keep them very happy by being supportive and giving them learning opportunities and listening. And last time I checked, those are all qualities of being nice. So I don't know if I think she's accurate in the fact that I try to be at least a nice guy. I don't think she's accurate in the fact that I don't, and that niceness means you don't have what it takes. I would say the exact opposite. In fact,
Yeah, for those of you who listened to the last show with Susan Salgado, you'll pick up on this as an idea, as a theme, right? That Danny, she said that something about Danny Meyer had a sixth sense about how to treat people and how to take care of people, right? I listen a lot to the Pivot podcast with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher, and although Scott can be a little bit acerbic, I think at times, and have the old as what Ed Freeman would call the old narrative about capitalism in his mind. He does talk about the fact that people think about businessmen and CEOs as always being assholes, and he's like, how do you get people? Most people who are successful aren't, right? There are some who are, but most people who are successful aren't, because they've done a great job at building of having empathy and getting other people to want to follow them, right? To want to be around them, to want to help them succeed, right? And I think that so it was I sort of latched on to that when she said you're too nice, and I was like, yeah, you missed the point
I,
in many ways
yeah,
about what we're trying to do here,
yeah.
right?
Just to add one more comment on Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table. That was one of the first business book. Well, not one of the first, but I read that way back in the day, and uh, a
Yep.
principle still sticks with me today, which is the 51 percenters, right? So he makes this quote in the book about you hire somebody 49% based on their skills or experience. You hire people 51% based on basically their attitude, how they treat their job, how they come to work every day, how they present, or how they present themselves, right, in the workplace.
Yep.
And um, you don't want it the opposite way. You don't want somebody that has 51% of the skills but is only going to, you know, um, show up for 49% of the job. So and
Right.
I know Susan was probably instrumental in helping implement that policy in Union Square.
Yeah, she was. She talked about that too, and she said that he had a unique characteristic, unique ability to identify those 51 percenters, right? Which
Right.
I think is really valuable for a leader. So we had Shark Tank. What was the outcome of being on Shark? I mean, the immediate. I mean, I was there,
Yeah.
but the immediate outcome of being in Shark Tank was pretty impactful, but also pretty scary, I guess.
Yeah, we talked to, I don't know, I talked to 20 different entrepreneurs who had been on Shark Tank, and they all gave me a lot of really good advice. The common denominator of the advice was don't let your website crash. Uh, our website crashed for about 8 minutes. It was probably the most stressful 8 minutes of my life up to that point. But then it came back on. We got a lot of customers actually signing up. Um, over the so our to give listeners a sense of the size of the business, we were about five full-time people, two part-time employees at the time. We had about 500 active customers, people with an active subscription to Hungry Harvest. Um, Within about 2 weeks, that had expanded to about 3,000 or so, um, and so we were really skyrocketing. We had a wait list of about 10,000 people that were all over the country that were signing up in places that we didn't deliver to quite yet. We used that momentum to raise a little bit of money from some angel investors in the area. We hired a little bit more of a team, and then we were off and running. I think in just again to put kind of perspective on this, in 2015, I believe our sales were 140K for the year. In 2016, the year we were on Shark Tank, they went up to 2.2 million. So over 10x, and most of that was
Wow.
due to Shark Tank.
Right. So 10x in 1 year.
Yeah, it was really
Yeah.
really neat.
That's pretty amazing. And look, I one of the things I'm going to try and get you to be a little bit, vulnerable and transparent here, because 10x in 1 year, and sort of where are you now?
So we are, let's see, about uh, we're we're about 10x where we were past 2016, about 8x or
Yep.
so. Yeah,
Right. So another eight to 10x,
yeah.
and that sounds and it is amazing. But
Mm,
I know from being in this with you, it's not been a. This is one thing that people they look at a Hungry Harvest and they think, look how successful they are. It's been a straight line all the way up,
yeah,
and we know better than that.
yeah,
It's
definitely.
definitely not been a straight line all the way up. So I talk about, you don't have to, talk about numbers and details, but talk about some of those struggles. I mean, the things that you've gone through, I think would be really impactful and really informative for other founders and people who are starting who are getting into that business. We know that there was direct to consumer headwinds. So talk about some of the struggles that you've gone through, because it's not been a straight line. It's not been straight up and to the right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've made a lot of strategic mistakes over the years. Direct to consumer was 95% of our business going through 2020, through the pandemic. We
Yeah.
decided to invest very heavily in it. Post Series A, we raised Series A about 13 or 14 million dollars back in 2020, and most of that money was going to be used towards direct to consumer marketing and building a better technology platform for our consumers and hiring a more experienced team. Um, None of that worked. None of that worked. And it took us a couple of years to figure that out. That direct to consumer was just an industry that it takes a lot of money to compete in, and we were just not interested in. We didn't have the really the scale or the proceeds um, to compete in that industry, and so we had to scale back on all three of those things, on our team, on our marketing dollars, on our technology front, and really pivot the business into a more where there are greener pastures. That's where we are today with sort of our B2B sales plays, with more food as medicine, with our warehouse services, with wholesale, which are the primary drivers of growth today. And so I sort of just breezed over, scaling up, from um, a direct to consumer and investing in that, to then scaling back to B2B. But in that process, it was very, 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 very painful. I mean, you're talking about laying off people that are extremely loyal and extremely productive, but we don't have a job for them anymore because, there's where the business is pivoting and we can't afford it. Um, and we're talking about, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on projects that we had to cut short because we no longer were invested into that line of the business. We've had to cancel a lot of relationships and fight back and claw every dollar back, as we tried to get the business back to profitability. And so I think the principle here. Also, just before I go into this principle, I just want to know if Barbara thinks any of those things are nice, right?
Yeah.
Nice is a way of doing business. Uh, it's not sort of the decisions that you make, right? You can lay people
Right.
off in the right
Absolutely.
way and still be nice about it. Yeah. But I think the principle is adaptability and persistence and keeping your head above water at all times. Never getting overwhelmed. I mean, I've got a million things going on right now. I've got, I don't know, 10 basically minor projects going on simultaneously. It is a little overwhelming, and
Yep.
I'm willing to be
Yep.
vulnerable about it. It's really about, getting organized, pushing through, keeping your head above water. Um, and as an entrepreneur, uh, you've got to be the one who um, is is the most sort of even keeled in your business, in my humble opinion. I mean, there are certainly times to get angry. There's certainly times to get excited. Uh, but what gets you through every single day of work, and it is hard work, uh, is trying to push through with that same mindset that you started the business with. For me, that mindset is I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to learn along the way. If it makes it, it makes it, and I'll give it my best effort, right? And if you stay with that sort of humble mindset, um, I think you can go a really long way with that.
So showing up as a learner and not as a knower, right?
That's
Being
exactly
open
right.
to finding new things. I remember, speaking of being open to finding new things, is a little bit of a side. Early on, when you were thinking about getting into the juice business,
Yeah,
uh, and you used to ask me, "What do I think?" And I was like, "Hell if I know, Evan. I don't know anything about the juice business, but I know someone who does."
yeah,
And I think you guys went down to visit Seth Goldman from Honest Tea,
yeah,
and that 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 dissuaded you from at that time going into the juice business. I think.
yeah. He told us he knows a lot of juice companies that are really struggling, and he'd be shocked if we made it as a juice business, and that helped us immensely. So thank you, Seth. for giving us that piece of advice, because that really helped uh, course correct us in our very early days.
Yeah, and I guess having that sort of learner's mindset
Yeah.
was one of the things that probably allowed you to access that, because there's plenty of founders that either wouldn't have taken the meeting. They probably would have taken the meeting because Seth is, very famous and very successful, but if they might have had their minds made up before they got there, right,
Yeah.
and not taken that advice.
Yeah. I mean, it's really about a balance between conviction, right, and learning, and it is possible to have both. Um, it is possible to have conviction about the mission and the values that you bring to your company, about the strategy that you want to implement, right? Want is a key word there. And then it's also important to learn that the strategies you want to implement might not be the ones that work best, and you need to be humble enough to sort of test the waters and test everything that you're doing, because most things most things won't work, right? And that's okay. Onwards and
Right.
upwards. Yeah, you got to learn to succeed. So as long as you don't, if as long as as I like don't stray away from that mindset of I'm just here to give my best effort and learn every day, and try to complete our mission. I think that's what's kept us on a decent path over the past 10 years.
Yeah. Um, I'm going to take a little bit of a pivot here, as we say.
Hmm.
You're, I mean, clearly a purpose driven person building a purpose driven business. And there's a lot of pushback these days against, the whole stakeholder idea and how you treat people and being purpose driven and, DEI and sustainability, all of that gets lumped in to this one discussion. And how does that, I mean, but I know you're a capitalist because we've had these discussions, now, as you say, for 10 years. So how do you square that circle? How do you, when people say purpose driven businesses are by very nature going to be less successful?
Yeah, I think um, I have a lot of thoughts. I'm just trying to organize them. First, I think gratitude goes both ways. Um,
Yeah.
Meaning, the folks that say the stakeholder model is BS or DEI is BS and employees should be grateful to be working anywhere. Well, they should be grateful that their employees are willing to work at those places, right? Gratitude goes both ways. And the same thing with
Yep.
customers and the community and environment. Gratitude goes both ways. Your customers should not be, or you should be grateful for your customers at the same time your customers are grateful for your providing a service. And so I really think that's sort of at the center of this conscious capitalism, of this stakeholder model movement, is we're living like in just trying to create a more grateful world, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I don't really care, is I don't really care what people think. And I don't care if we're more successful or less successful as a result of implementing DEI or implementing stakeholder management or, implementing some of these things. It's what I want to do and it's what I feel is right, right?
Yep.
I feel as if uh, my journey as an entrepreneur is more important than just what I'm personally getting paid. Our employees' journey is what more important than what they're personally getting paid, right? While that's a big part of it, that's if you ask anybody what their motivations are, money is certainly top. It might be not be the top number one, but it's certainly top three. So it can't be ignored, and that's where the capitalism piece comes in. Uh, but it's also a sense of fulfillment that comes in to folks' motivations. And so um, for me, and I can imagine a lot of people empathize with this feeling as well. Uh, sure, if you don't believe in the stakeholder model or the DEI, go for it. Do your best. I'm going to be over here doing my best to be an inclusive place where employees are feel valued and feel welcomed. They're paid a really good wage, um, and we can listen to their ideas. And I'm going to be here, just being grateful for the opportunity that I have to make an impact on this world. So, yeah, maybe an unpopular opinion. I sort of and Jeff,
Well,
this and if I could just add one more thing, Jeff, because my
yeah,
opinion on this has changed since 2010. If you asked me this question, or since 2014 and 10 years ago, if you asked me this question in 2014, I probably would have said my mission is to change how people believe so we can spread stakeholder capitalism, right? And I would have been trying to convince people that this is the right way to
yeah,
do business. I no longer believe that, right? I actually believe, I know that might be part of your mission. I actually believe that practicing stakeholder capitalism and conscious capitalism is really the best service I can do to this planet and to these employees, and to the different folks we have in part of our ecosystem. And it's not going out there preaching, right? So
yeah.
I've sort of recognized my lane, so to speak, in the past 10 years.
No, it's you know what, Evan, you're right about that. I mean, obviously that's why I'm doing this podcast. In many
Yeah,
ways, some of it is, some of it's just to expose people doing good things, and some of it's just to I get to have conversations with people I like and care about.
yeah,
But but you're right about that, right? I mean, maybe when in the last podcast we did with Susan Salgado, she talked about, I was talking about the pushback, some of the same discussion, and she talked about this notion of shame, and how when people feel shame, they one of the things they do is they lash out, right? And part of and she sort of opened my eyes to this. Part of the idea of shame was, if we're always preaching, if we're always trying to convert someone to do something different, right? If they feel like a shame for where they are, they're not most likely to come to your way of thinking. They're more likely to lash out in some way. So maybe you're right, right? Maybe the path forward is just to keep doing what we're doing, right? And in some ways, I think I've come around to that a little bit. I'm sure Rick Fraser would deny that, but I've probably come around to that a little bit because even in the accelerator program, we get founders of it saying, "All right, well, this is all well and good, Jeff, but um, can't you make money being the other type of person, right?" You can make money not being purpose driven. You can make money in sin businesses. You can make money treating people like crap. And I'm like, absolutely, you most certainly can. And no one has to listen to me. All I'm saying is that what I care about is this idea of human flourishing. And that's what I'm trying to put forth. If you want to do something else, have at it.
yeah, that's
You don't
right.
have to do what I do, right?
Yeah,
It's just where I want to live,
yeah,
right? It's the world that I want to live in. I don't want to live in that world of command and control, and you're only here to serve shareholders. I want to live in the world where we're all here to serve each other. So, yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really good point.
yeah, and I completely
Yeah,
agree. Just add one more comment. Most entrepreneurs go into business, and the same is true for me, to kind of create the world that we want to live in. And when I mean the world we want to live in, I don't necessarily mean the entire planet. I mean the sort of the smaller world of the communities we touch, the employees we talk to, the customers we service, right? That is a world that I wanted to change. And hopefully we have over the past 10 years. And I think that probably is a main motivator for a lot of entrepreneurs.
yeah. This is a really great example of another thing that I say to people all the time is that as obviously part of my job as a venture capitalist is to create value for my LPs and return the money to them. But just like you said, you're going to do what you want to do, and people know that, and they can either come along or not come along based on what they know. It's sort of the same thing because
Yeah,
we tell people all the time that as a venture capitalist, the job that I want to do is investing in the future I want to see. And that's the type of companies we're going to invest in.
yeah,
Companies that are creating the future we want to see. So we want to see a future with less food waste and more people with access to great food. So we invest in people like Evan and Hungry Harvest, right? And
yeah,
then, our LPs, that everyone may not agree with that, and that's okay,
right.
right? They don't have, those who don't have to invest in our fund, but those who do understand what we're all about,
That's right.
right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So, two more things before we close up, Evan. Let's talk quickly just about the you mentioned this earlier, the whole path towards food as medicine. Sort of tell us a little bit about that and sort of what you're doing there.
Yeah, food as medicine is a pretty fascinating concept. It's gained a lot of momentum in the past 3 or 4 years. The concept is 2 or 3 thousand years old. Whenever Hippocrates was alive, if you've heard of the Hippocratic Oath that doctors have to take, that they're treat people. Hippocrates was that comes from Hippocrates, and he basically was this Greek philosopher or Roman. I actually don't know. I should probably look that up. But anyway, don't fact
I
check
think
me.
it's Greek. Yeah,
Greek, yeah, don't fact check me.
yeah.
Anyways, he said food is
Zay, get the fact checking.
yeah. Anyways, he said food is medicine, right? He was the original sort of, or maybe not the original, but like one of the most famous people to sort of bring that forward. And here we are in 2024, and this movement has sort of come around to the healthcare community, to hospitals, and to food banks, and to insurers and payers, to Medicare, to Medicaid, to the USDA, to all these players that are actually looking at our food system and our health system, and realizing, wait a second, there must be a relation between these two. That folks that are not eating properly because they don't have access, or they don't have education, or they can't afford healthier foods. They are also sort of causing a drain on the healthcare system, and we're sort of treating people when they're broken rather than prevention. And so there's a number of different movements, publicly funded through the government, privately funded through philanthropy, privately funded through businesses, to try and create a healthcare system that is more focused around food that people are eating and the access that people have. Hungry Harvest, where we fit in, we provide produce prescriptions and medically tailored groceries to thousands of patients across the Mid-Atlantic through hundreds of partner organizations, oftentimes, actually the vast majority of times, at no cost to that patient. And that's being funded
Hmm.
by a healthcare partner, a hospital system, a grant, state funds. And so we started this program called Harvest RX back in 2018 with our great start partners over at MedStar, who originally started this program called Food RX, for a portion of their population that has grown from a couple dozen patients to thousands of patients that we're serving every year just through that one partnership. Um, and since then, we've really seen this movement go from on the fringes of healthcare conferences to, and back in 2018, to like the White House Conference on Nutrition and Hunger back in
Yeah.
2022, and getting billions of dollars in commitments to this space. And lots of states are starting to commit billions of dollars of Medicaid and Medicare funding towards reimbursing food as medicine. So I really think the healthcare industry is heading in the right direction by reimbursing foods that people should eat, and in addition to nutrition counseling and nutrition education and access. And Hungry Harvest is in a really good spot, I believe, to benefit from this rapidly growing industry.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's one of the most fascinating areas of food and entrepreneurship in the food access world right now. Is sort of it's if anyone out there is listening to Dr. Tia,
Hmm.
his book Outlive, talking about medicine 3.0. I think this is sort of right in the middle of that medicine 3.0 thing.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Go ahead.
as we close up here, thanks again for joining. It's been great to spend time with you 2 days in a row for me. So lucky me. I have two questions for you.
Sure.
One is, what are you most excited about? Actually, I have three questions for you. The last
Okay.
one's not related to business.
What am I most excited about?
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be business either.
Okay. Yeah, I actually wasn't going. Well, I was sort of going in the life
Yeah.
direction, but I would say the opportunity to raise a family and be an entrepreneur and do what I love is something
Yep.
that excites me every single day. Now I have a daughter and a wife. When I started, I didn't have any of those things, right? I was living at home in my parents' basement, just trying to get us started. And um, to be here today is just incredibly uh, humbling. I'm very grateful for how far we've come, and now I get the opportunity to again do the job that I love with people that I love, making impact that I feel is really important to this world, and do the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my life, which is raise a daughter. So that's what I'm most excited about right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One piece of, advice for startup founders who are listening to this, maybe one thing you wish you knew that you know now that you wish you knew then.
Yeah, I like to always go back to the persistence piece, uh, about how important that is. I think that's probably if you drop all your other skills as an entrepreneur for some reason for a day, imagine like your Space Jam and the cartoons steal all your skills and leave you with one. The one they should leave you with is persistence. Right? We use this problem a lot in Hungry Harvest because we're a small team but we're mighty. We say just problems to solve, no matter how big the problem is, how small it is, whether the power goes out of the warehouse at 2 in the morning and we got 1,000 deliveries to make the next day, or our payroll is thrown off, or there's fraud in our bank account. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because guess what? Just problems to solve. That's right. So
I love
it's
that.
just about persistence. And by the way, I use that in my personal life too. If um, we're trying to grow grass and been trying to grow grass for years, just another problem to solve, right? It's
Just a problem solved.
so I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm gonna
It
use that one.
it gets you a long way in life if you look at everything like that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm going to use that one. I'll
Yeah.
add to that. I always tell people when they get in, in these big, sort of situations where you're feeling overwhelmed about, everything that's going on. Let's break it down. What's the one next thing that you should do, that you need to do?
Yeah.
Not the next 10 things, just the next one thing.
Yeah.
Get that one done and then move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And just problems to solve. All right.
Exactly. And if Jeff, if I can add one piece of this, just a sort of a
Yeah.
real life experience here, and it's a little heavier, but I promise it has a good outcome. I found this skill to be extremely useful in sort of emergency situations as well. Over the past 10 years, um, I think I was somewhere in public recently, and there was an older gentleman who took a fall. There were people that were screaming and freaking out, and I found myself sort of directing, not directing traffic, but just able to get one step in front of the other. Right? I have no medical experience, by the way. I don't do. I'm actually quite squeamish, in fact. But I found that sort of the skills I've learned as an entrepreneur, like nothing can really phase me. Um, and I've learned that over a series of 10 years, and it's taken a lot of practice. And if you look at everything as just a problem to solve, it will really again take you very far in a lot of situations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, last thing. I've been on Ed Freeman's podcast, and he hit me with this, and I was so taken aback by it. So I must steal it and use it. So you are stranded on a desert island. You get to pick 5 songs or 5 albums. You get to
Mm,
choose. What are they going to be?
I mean, you got to go with the albums, right? Because there's more songs. So, "Rumors" by Fleetwood Mac. Um,
Nice.
uh, we're gonna go. What's it called Abbey Roads by the Beatles. We're gonna go
Okay.
The
Good.
Essential Springsteen. Um, and then more modern, we're gonna go Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. And I would say, what's another really good one? I would probably say Eagles by the Eagles. Their
There you go.
original album.
All right.
Yeah,
There's
the,
there's your 5 from Evan Lutz, folks. Don't
good
forget
question.
Zay will have all of these in the show notes because we're going to put together a Capitalism Remix playlist. So there's your new five for today. Ev, thanks a lot for joining. I know you got a lot on your plate. We really
Okay.
appreciate it. It's good to see you. Continued success, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Sounds good, Jeff. Always make time for you, and pleasure talking to you as well. I always appreciate your perspective here.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks.
One more time through the Capitalism Remix. As always, so impactful to talk to Evan. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. He's in our portfolio with Conscious Venture Partners, one of our most respected CEOs, mainly because of all the things that he's gone through, all the ups and downs that he's had to deal with. So, hope you enjoyed that one. Look forward to seeing you all back here on the next issue of Capitalism, the Remix.